Everything is judged by its appearance. What is unseen counts for nothing. Never let yourself get lost in the crowd, then, or buried in oblivion. Stand out. Be conspicuous, at all cost. Make yourself a magnet of attention by appearing larger, more colorful, more mysterious than the bland and timid masses. He was of short stature, an outsider to French society, without a famous name, and without a noble lineage. But a few years later, he became the most famous man in Europe. How? Because he understood one law: to be noticed is more important than simply to be. Law 6 states, court attention at all cost. Napoleon Bonaparte was more than just a brilliant military leader. He was a grand master of image, turning his life into a spectacular performance. He knew that in a world ruled by the masses, to be invisible is to be forgotten. He didn't just lead armies, he was a master of commanding the world's attention. When Napoleon began his journey, no one paid him any attention. He was merely a junior lieutenant, a thin, sickly youth in a worn-out uniform that hung awkwardly on his frame. But worst of all was his voice. Whenever he opened his mouth in the refined salons of Paris, silence would fall, followed by caustic whispers. His harsh, guttural Corsican accent grated on the ears of the aristocrats. To them, he was a wild islander, an outsider from a place no one truly considered France. The mockery was blatant. They threw insults about his humble origins right to his face. In high society, he was treated as a ghost. Men would demonstratively refuse to shake his hand, and ladies would turn their fans away, hiding disdainful smiles. He stood in the shadows of the gilded halls of Versailles, a man with no name, no connections, and no future. In a world where everything was decided by blood and titles, he was transparent. And for him, that was the greatest danger of all. Napoleon realized, if you do not stir interest, you will be crushed. If you do not force people to look at you, you are doomed to oblivion. He understood that attention was not mere vanity. Attention was the only way to survive where you are considered a nobody. He decided that he would not just make the world notice him, he would make the world tremble at the very mention of his name. The siege of Toulon. The port is gripped by the British fleet, and the French army is paralyzed by the indecision of its commanders. At this moment, he steps onto the stage. Napoleon was not the strongest man on the battlefield, and he was certainly not the highest-ranking officer, merely a captain of artillery, one of many. But he was the boldest. While the generals argued, Napoleon acted. He forced his presence upon them, ignoring rank. He proposed a plan that seemed like madness: to seize the heights and aim the cannons directly at the British ships in the harbor. He understood what others missed: if you cut off the garrison's supply and path of evacuation, the city would fall on its own. Under a hail of bullets, personally leading the assault on the forts, he watched his plan come to life. As the British ships, engulfed in flames, began their frantic retreat, the battle was won. Toulon had fallen. The outcast with a strange accent became a hero overnight. For this victory, he was promoted to brigadier general, at the age of 24. And in the silence that followed the battle, everyone began to ask, who is this man? Fame arrived in Paris long before Napoleon did. While he was nursing the wounds received in the smoke of battle, the city was already breathing his name. But Napoleon did not stop at military triumph alone. He understood that while a sword can conquer territory, only an image can conquer minds. He launched his most ambitious campaign yet, the battle for the people's imagination. Paintings commissioned from the finest masters depicted him as a fearless hero on a rearing horse. Newspapers, which he edited himself, described his every move as the feat of a demigod. Stories of his kindness to his soldiers and his iron will spread through the streets faster than official dispatches. He wasn't just fighting on the battlefield against enemy armies. He was fighting in the salons, in the coffeehouses, and in the hearts of ordinary Parisians. He was fighting for their attention. Napoleon transformed himself from a man into a myth. From a poor officer from the fringes, into a symbol of national rebirth. He knew that power belongs not to the one who is strongest, but to the one whom everyone watches with awe. And while the old aristocracy tried to ignore him, France was already at his feet. Not because he had entered Paris, but because he had long since captured its attention. Napoleon realized a crucial truth: people don't follow the most capable. They follow the most prominent. You may possess great strength, but if you fail to project it, you will remain invisible, and those who are invisible can never lead. Then came the great victories. The Italian campaign transformed him from a general into a living legend. A series of crushing blows against the Austrians made all of Europe tremble. Then came Egypt, the Battle of the Pyramids, where he defeated the Mamluks, and the triumph at Abukir. But behind the brilliance of these victories lay a cold strategy. Napoleon no longer cared for his soldiers, the very men who, with their own blood, raised him onto the pedestal. He no longer concerned himself with the needs of those who followed him into the fire. Now, he only cared about how it would look in the eyes of history. His staff now always included specially hired scribes and artists. Their task was not to record the truth, but to create a myth. While soldiers were dying of plague and thirst in the sands of Egypt, painters produced canvases where Napoleon appeared as a merciful god. He committed something bolder than any military maneuver: he privatized victory. In official bulletins, the names of heroes and regiments vanished. Only one name remained. He erased the contributions of thousands from history, ascribing every success exclusively to his own genius. He realized that the masses do not like complexity. They don't need a report on casualties. They need one shining hero to follow. And Napoleon became that hero, stepping over those who had helped him become one. Napoleon returned to France no longer as a servant of the people, but as their master. Upon becoming emperor, he performed an unprecedented gesture. He snatched the crown from the hands of the Pope and placed it on his own head. From that moment on, the opinions of others ceased to exist for him. The only god he worshipped was his own greatness. Paris was transformed into a stage for his glory. Triumphal arches were erected. Painters depicted his triumphs with grand strokes, and censors scrubbed every shadow of doubt from the newspapers. He wasn't just ruling a country, he was writing a novel about himself, where every word spoke of his immortal deeds. 1812. Napoleon takes his most reckless step, the invasion of Russia. It was an act of madness that violated every principle that had once brought him glory. Blinded by the brilliance of his own monuments, he had lost sight of reality. The Grande Armée, gathered from all across Europe, was melting away, not in grand battles, but in the boundless snows and an endless retreat. And here, what the emperor feared most happened: his magic vanished. The soldiers who had idolized their leader for years suddenly saw in him not a demigod, but a man consumed by hubris. Hunger, cold, and the corpses lining the road to the west shattered the myth he had created. The soldiers stopped believing in their king. In their eyes, he was no longer a master of victory, he had become a master of catastrophe. The world's attention was still fixed upon him, but now it was a gaze full of horror and condemnation. It was the beginning of the end for his empire. The collapse was swift. The man who once held the attention of all Europe was left in absolute solitude. His allies betrayed him, his marshals turned away, and the aura of invincibility he had crafted crumbled into dust. The former emperor was arrested and sent into shameful exile on the remote island of St. Helena. Now, his only audience was the boundless ocean. Napoleon's story teaches us that attention is a powerful weapon, but it requires control. You can soar to the top by crafting a vibrant image, but if there is nothing behind it but hubris, your fall will be as loud as your triumph. Remember, attention is easy to capture, but impossible to sustain if you forget those who helped you stand out in the first place.